get to know who our three candidates for the Board of Directors are. Welcome to the annual Meet the Candidates Forum, sponsored by the Forum Committee, in which we hope to introduce you to the positions and backgrounds of the three volunteers running for the Board of Directors this year. The Forum Committee is an independent group of sea ranchers whose purpose is to present topics of interest to members on issues jointly facing us as a community without taking any active positions. Our May Forum, which comes up on the 4th of May, will be a discussion of what happens if you have a medical emergency at the sea ranch. Who will respond? Who are the local emergency response providers? And they will discuss with you how emergencies are to be handled. So mark your calendars for May 4th. Before we begin today, I would like to point out the lighted emergency exits and the restrooms across the garden. And we'd also like to invite you to spend some time individually with each of the candidates at the conclusion of the forum, when coffee and cookies and a few other little treats will be offered and available at the rear of the room. So after you've returned all your chairs to the racks, please feel free to linger as long as you like and as long as the candidates are willing to stay and talk with you, because we would like you to leave here feeling that you know who they are and what they stand for. I met earlier with each of the three candidates to review the ground rules for today's discussions. Numbers were drawn to determine the order of the opening and closing remarks, which will be limited to 2 minutes each speaker. You've all received their written first statements in the mail, so we hope to shorten our introductions so that you're not going to hear a repeat of what you've already read and taken a look at. Our hope is that we can pose questions to the candidates so that we can have a more lively debate on their qualifications and positions. Questions were solicited from members through the bulletin, the ICO, and soundings, and announcements were made, and they were then prepared to focus on those areas that you suggested. After the initial statements, questions will be posted to each candidate in rotating order for a 2-minute response. And then the moderator will give each of the other candidates an opportunity to rebut or agree. Comments will be held to 2 minutes. So the 2-minute warning is it for questions and answers throughout the afternoon. At 4 o'clock, we'll break for about 10 minutes. Upon resumption, questions will be taken from members from the floor and directed to individual candidates or to all three candidates, however you choose to direct your question. Audience members are advised, when they want to raise a question, to state their question without giving their views or experiences in so stating. We do not give you 2 minutes. We want to hear from the candidates, not to give you a forum for your points of view. But if your question takes 2 minutes to ask the question, we'll be patient. If a question is a follow-up question to an earlier question, or if you need clarification of an answer, please briefly refer to the previous question. But otherwise, don't rehash what we've already heard. Last year, when we had the Meet the Candidates Forum, there were 4 female candidates. And at the time I asked the question, where are the men? Well, here they are. 3 of them stepped forward to offer their service this year, and we want to thank all of them. May I introduce Michael Bloom, Drew McCalley, and Robert Scarola. Robert drew the first card to present his opening statement, so he will be first, followed then by Drew, and then Michael. The closing statements will be in the opposite order, based upon drawings: Robert, Michael, and Drew. Drew ends up in the middle on both of them, so maybe that's a good thing, maybe it's not. So I would like to begin by inviting Robert to present his opening statement. And if he would introduce his wife, who's here in the audience, just so you all know who she is as well. And I'll give him an extra 10 seconds.
Nancy is my wife. And my campaign manager. Oh, I'm sorry. Don't come up.
You can stand up with the station. There you go.
Yeah. Oh, stand up.
There you go. You can sit down at the table. How's that?
Well, good afternoon. I'm Robert Scarola. Thanks for taking the time to come to this forum. Let me start by saying that I have a very positive view of the future of the Sea Ranch. That view is based on the accomplishments of the past and the solid platform of the present. I have a background in business, technology, and education. I believe a board member has to do as much as possible to research, gather real facts, and analyze data in order to truly understand how to make fair, equitable, and community-focused decisions. To that end, I spent the last 2 years living here full-time and actively participating in the Sea Ranch as a member of 3 committees, attending all board meetings except one, and attending a wide range of committee, work group, task force, workshop, and other meetings. We have many hard-won achievements to our credit over the past several years, including continuing stable dues and a major water system upgrade, and we're about to celebrate the 50th birthday of this amazing place. So we can celebrate the best of our past and the achievements of the present, but we also need to be consistently aware of how the present issues we are confronted with have a longer reach and need to be our springboard to a successful future. So here then are some of the issues that I see should be addressed with the same kind of hard work, focus on factual and substantive information, and close attention to detail that has worked so well for our community in the past. Number 1, improve broadband services for all Sea Ranchers. Number 2, successful resolution of the Burbank housing situation. Number 3, continued effective management of our budget and dues. Number 4, continued and expanded focus on vegetation management, costs, and how to mitigate those costs. Number 5, increased attention paid to regional concerns. And number 6, maintaining open and collegial dialogue with the board, the membership, and the staff. I personally feel to be an effective board member, I have to keep learning and stay in close touch with members, volunteers, and staff of our community. I'd very much like to hear about your concerns and ideas over the next 2 hours as we get to know each other. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. And he was right on the button at 2 minutes. He's really practiced. Sure, please.
That's tethered. Thank you for. I'm Drew McCalley, and my wife, Marilyn Green, is right back there. We live at the way south end, almost as far south as you can get. But anyway, thank you for coming out this afternoon and participating in this. This is our representative democracy, and it's a privilege to stand here before you as one of the candidates for the board of directors of your association. I don't take this lightly. Being one of 7 individuals elected to make policy decisions on your behalf is a tremendous responsibility. I do believe I bring a substantial set of qualifications. I'm going to leave issues to, I think the questions will cover them quite well, but I'm just going to summarize briefly once again my qualifications. I have substantial breadth and depth of financial experience, the bulk of which was in an organization very similar to TSR in terms of governance. It was the Hewlett-Packard Credit Union, which is a member-owned nonprofit financial cooperative governed by a volunteer elected board of directors. So you can see there's quite a bit of similarity in structure, even though the business banking was quite different. During the 20 years I worked there, I performed a number of financial and internal control functions, financial analysis, auditing, internal controls, fraud control, budget. I was in charge of the budget process there for 12 years, so I've seen every trick in the books when it comes to budgeting. And I also worked with our HR manager for about a year, building a pay structure from the ground up when we basically had to start from scratch on that. So I believe I can bring substantial related experience to being a member of your board. I also bring a collegial attitude and an open and inquiring mind to anything I do. I think this will be essential on a board that must tackle a number of issues that do not have simple answers. If they had simple answers, we wouldn't still be talking about them. I insist on doing my homework as issues arrive, and I try to not to take positions that are etched in stone until I've done my homework. I also listen to alternate views, and I'm able to change my views if new data is presented. I'm not dogmatic. So, in summary, I think I have the qualifications you need for your board, and I ask for your support. Thank you.
Hi there, I'm Michael Bloom. My recent moniker at Sea Ranch, however, is the one nobody knows. I'd also like to apologize in advance for any of you who've ever taught. One of the problems that comes with teaching is that as soon as you go on vacation, you get sick. And that's happened to me today. Today's my first day off, and I'm sick. So I won't be shaking anyone's hand because I want to protect you from what I got from someone touching me, probably. When I decided to take this thing on, two questions have come up most often with the people that I talk to and who realize I'm the one no one knows. The first is, as a part-timer, why would you want to be on the board? And in looking at our current board and the history of the board, I suspect that this is not a disability. My wife and I, oh excuse me, I'm sorry, Audrey's about my wife right here in front. So Audrey and I get up there pretty much every weekend, and we spend a lot of time here, and we're interested in the issues of the Sea Ranch. So I don't believe that being a part-timer would be a problem. The second question I get often asked is, how many committees have you served on? What's your volunteer work? And the answer, honestly, is none. Because I still work for it full-time. Most of the weekends I get up here after work at 6, leave at about 3 or 4 on Sunday, and most of my Saturdays spent grading papers or planning the following week. And because when I get involved in things, I get into them full bore, I didn't think it was right to join any of the many committees that have interest to me without being able to commit myself to being there when I was needed. I applaud all of the people that do the incredible amount of work in this place from a volunteer standpoint, but didn't feel that I was in a position to do that yet as a part-timer. When I was here at the winter meeting, and Diddy put out the call to service, and I didn't see a whole lot of reaction, and it was Thursday was coming, and no one had signed up for this, I thought to myself, well, I have civic duty, and this is the kind of thing that I don't necessarily have to be there every day or each week doing whatever that work is. I can do it from home. During the midweek, I can be here on the weekends. So I decided to throw my hat into the ring, not realizing there was a ring. When the other two gentlemen signed up, I was faced with a decision. I entered the process because I felt I was needed. And I then looked at it and said to myself, well, the Sea Ranchers deserve a choice. If I were to drop out, it would be 2 people, and there wouldn't be a choice. So that's the reason I stayed in. That's the reason I'm still here and standing in front of you right now. I think I bring an open mind. I have no agenda. I haven't been on any committee, so I don't have any committee's particular agenda. And I have ability to analyze material and to deal with complex issues, and also to form consensus. I believe I do that. So thank you for having me, and I look forward to our conversation.
Since all three of them stuck to their 2 minutes very well, I think we were in for a very efficient board sessions these next few years. All right, now we're going to go to the questions that you all have submitted, and I'm going to take them in random order, and I'll start with Drew. Drew, what do you think are the 3 most significant controllable issues that the board of directors will face in the next 3 years? And what is your view to resolving these issues? 2 minutes.
Am I on?
You're on? You're on.
Okay, can you hear me? Okay, it's better. Controllable issues, I assume that excludes Burbank housing. And maybe we'll get back to that later. So I'm going to talk in a few seconds about fire safety, probably fire safety views and, am I dropping out again? Yeah. Fire safety views and, well, maybe I'll just talk loud. Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. No. Okay.
Try this one.
Okay.
Don't try this one.
Okay. Okay, fire safety views and high-speed internet, how about that? And what we can do to address those 3, I think we are already making significant progress on addressing fire safety. We've had a number of task forces we've had the 2008 Fire Safety Task Force, which issued a number of excellent recommendations which are being carried out. I think probably sea ranchers can argue over the pace of carrying them out. That's probably related more than anything else to the budget. I, for one, am in favor of pushing as hard as we can on addressing fire safety issues. I guess the way I would put it is as hard as the membership is willing to pay for, as fast as the membership is willing to pay for, because it ain't going to be free. But I think we are making significant progress. I think it is probably, aside from Burbank, the most important issue that we face on Sea Ranch. Briefly on views, I do think that views are important. They clearly, obviously, all you have to do is look at property values in Sea Ranch, and it's probably the single most important factor in determining the value of a house here. So you can't pretend that they don't matter. We do have to have I think probably the single most important thing we can do to address views, to be as brief as I can, is to establish some kind of a view protocol that may be a more succinct and clear version of procedures that are already in place, perhaps enhanced, perhaps clarified, because I think the main problem that people have with the association when they have a problem about views is understanding the reasoning behind decisions that the association makes in approving or denying vegetation management requests related to views.
That's 2 minutes.
Okay. Thank you.
Now I'd like to ask Robert and then Michael if you'd like to comment as well.
Thanks. Well, I agree that views are important and we need to be focused on fire safety. But I tell you what's controllable to me is that if we take the reports and the information that we are getting from McBride, from the Commons Landscape Committee, from the Planning Committee, from all of this work that's been done, and we start to figure out how we want to approach this in an overall community-based fashion, we will get to some real solutions in the next couple of years. And one of the things we're going to have to deal with, and I think it's controllable, is how we work on to pay for this. I mean, we have a lot of things in front of us that we really want to be looking at, aside from our basic budget, which is a dues-based basic budget. But we also have to consider if we have special projects, if we have special needs, if we have things we want to do, we need to get smart about how we're going to actually create some revenue-generating projects here that can help us pay for that. We spent $600,000 last year just on vegetation management on trees. Our community manager has now aggregated that into a fund, a vegetation management fund. But we need to start looking at ways to really effectively put that into place. I mean, I also truly believe in the next 2 years, we can have broadband service here to everyone. I am really, really committed to try to do that. And the people who have been working on that, the telecommunications subcommittee and the community manager, we have a lot of work to do. I really appreciate their dedication and their effort, and they have made a huge gain already with fiber optic line coming in and the kinds of things that are going on. But we need what I'm calling astute partnerships, or a way to come up with plans that we can use ourselves to improve this. And telecommunications and broadband services here, we just have to have that. We live in a modern world, and it's going to, if you talk about one single thing that's going to affect property values more than anything else, if you want to put it in that category, it's probably having good broadband service everywhere. And I just want to say just one last thing. Vegetation management it's not a specific thing that has to do with a specific item. We have to look at this as we are a very biodiverse habitat that has lots of things going on in it. And that's the thing that the McBride report, if you haven't seen it, it's on the web, made so clear that we really have to look at this in an overall way and come up with plans that work for the overall good of our whole system. Thanks.
I agree with what both these gentlemen said. The key word being controllable. If things were easily controllable, they'd be taken care of. It wouldn't be a problem. I agree with Robert that I would have an opportunity to go on a tour with the community manager of all of the hidden places at Sea Ranch. And one of the things that really interested me was the number of items in which we've taken control of revenue sources, especially with things around alternative energy. And I was impressed with the Moonraker Tower and how that's a possible item of revenue. I was impressed with the solar panels, having to do with the water system. I'm really intrigued by the concept of biomass converters. We are going to have a lot of biomass to deal with as we continue our vegetation control. And if we can, instead of having it be a cost that we've got to truck it somewhere or move it away somewhere, if we are willing, and it will again cost something to do that, but if we are willing to spend some money to create what could be a regional center for the taking biomass and turning it into usable energy, I really think that's something we can control. So I think the ecological elements and taking items and turning them into sources of revenue, I think is something that we can control and something that we should look into. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to combine the next couple of questions. And I'm going to ask Michael, would you respond first? How do you perceive the association staff and their operations, and how do you envision working with staff? And in the same context, I'm going to ask, what is your view of the appropriate board role in overseeing or directing our community manager?
Every time I come up here and deal with the staff, I come away if not satisfied. I believe our staff is wonderful. When I get up here, the roads are clear, I can get where I need to go, the trails are taken care of. All of the interactions I have with this place working the way it's supposed to work, it does that. I believe that the job of a board is to set policy and keep their hands above the line, to hire competent professionals, and in our fortunate condition, to allow our competent volunteers to be the specialists and the experts to do what it is they do. I believe it's the board's job to oversee, to set policy, to look at trends, and to give guidance, and then let the experts take over. And my general impression, and it's not without anecdotal events that don't fit into the overall, there are exceptions, of course, always when you're dealing with people in a myriad of situations. But overall, I think this place is run very, very well, and that we have a wonderful staff. Thank you.
Would either of the other of you like to comment?
Sure.
Well, I'm fond of saying that of all the community managers at Sea Ranch, Frank Bell's my favorite. I think what I'm saying is that the staff, I've worked with the staff on a number of projects, writing and comprehensive environmental plan, and working with committees and staff representatives on committees. And these are dedicated people. I think that we have an incredible staff. Our financial staff is wonderful, and every support person I've run into is really there. There's nobody hanging out, taking money and not doing their job at all. And they're doing way beyond probably what they're getting paid for. So I really appreciate their effort. At the same time, I feel the need to, and I agree with Michael about not being a micromanager. I ran a company for 16 years. We had 16 technicians and 6 administrative people, and our philosophy was always hire good people, put them in place, and let them do their jobs, and step in if that wasn't the case, but otherwise, we'll let them do their jobs. And I think that's the board role, is to do that as far as staff is concerned. On the other hand, I also think it's important to spend time with staff, with what's going on, and to really understand what the issues are. It's not enough, I don't think, to simply read a document that's presented to the board and hear what, and understand from that document, try to understand from that document what's going on. It works a lot of the time, but not all the time. So I'm also a little proactive about ideas and where I think things could go. Not to step on their toes, not to micromanage, but to be intelligently involved. And my sense is that as we go forward, this is going to become more and more important to us to keep a good sense of what is the priorities that we need to start setting and how we need to do them. So thanks.
Dreams?
Well, I think I'm going to make it unanimous here on this question. I admire our staff tremendously. I think they work very hard. I've had, almost without exception, the most positive interactions with our staff. I've had the opportunity, through the generosity of Frank, offering the candidates the opportunity to meet with his managers and get to know their operations in recent weeks. My admiration for what they do and how they do it has increased. And also through my work on the Finance Committee, I've seen budget processes, I've managed budget processes, and I very much admire the way Ellen and Frank put together a budget, the honesty with which they do it. And Ellen, my goodness, she's not only an excellent financial manager, she's like the history museum of TSRA. And in terms of the board role, I would simply echo what both Michael and Robert said, just with one kind of visual, so to speak. Picture the organization chart of TSRA. At the top is the members, next is the board of directors, and below that is Frank, the community manager, and all of the staff. There is one line between the board of directors and all the rest of it, and that goes to the community manager. There are not 17 lines leading from the board of directors inviting us to micromanage the staff. The board hires the community manager and sets policy. The community manager manages the staff and the organization.
Thank you. I'm going to go to Michael on this one. Michael, do you think our dues are expensive or unmanaged? Why or why not? Do you feel that the present budget process recognizes the needs of the membership or is too limited from input from members?
When I think about the services I receive here for approximately $200 a month, and I think about what it would cost me to have many things I don't personally use, but since I have a sense of community, hopefully my fellow community members are using them. I don't swim, unless I have to, but we have some beautiful swimming pools here. I don't play tennis, but when my brother-in-law comes to visit, there are tennis courts. There are saunas. There are trails that are always open. Often when I walk the trails, I come across trees that have been recently cut, haven't fallen across the trail, but it's not across the trail at the moment. The roads are well kept. I don't have to list all the things for you, you know what they are. If I tried to pay for that anywhere else, I guarantee it would cost way more than $200 a month. So I think our dues are very reasonable. Now that doesn't mean I don't believe that part of the board's duty and charge is to oversee them and keep them reasonable, and to have an eye towards making things be as affordable as they can possibly be. I believe the budget process should be as open as it could possibly be, and in a way that allows input from all members of the association. But then, as with most issues, once that input is given, then it's up to the people who make the decisions to make those decisions. Thank you.
Go ahead.
just to mix it up. I agree with Michael. I think our dues. Two comments on the dues. I think our dues are very reasonable for what we get. I would refer. I mean, that kind of gut level feeling I had was confirmed for me by our friend Peter back there, who's becoming one of my favorite analytical, I guess, checker of assumptions, because he's always lately he's been feeding me lots of good information, and one of which was a tremendous analysis he did a couple of years ago of what it would cost piece by piece to pay for everything that our association does by, for instance, say, going to some county government and finding out how much per mile they spend maintaining roads and apply that to our 45 miles of roads, how much you would pay for access to 3 swimming pools and X number of tennis courts, etc., etc. And I can tell you that the sum was probably close to twice what we pay. So I think we do get a bargain, but also I'm a budget guy, and I believe in avoiding budget shocks. People have built the current, I mean, as much of a bargain as it is, members have built the current assessment structure into their budgets. And some members do have fairly tight budgets, so it's part of the responsibility of the board in the budgeting process to maintain a reasonable growth rate in the assessments, absent some special, community agreed upon priority that needs to be taken care of. As far as the budget process is concerned, I think the current budget process is an improvement on the budget process, the kind of Wild West budget process that we had when I first got here 6 years ago. I mean, my gosh, as a budget manager, that was completely out of control. I mean, this is, to quote someone who I won't name for fear of getting him into trouble, this is a representative democracy, not a commune. And, and the old budget process, I think, was just too much down the spectrum toward running it like a commune.
I agree with Drew and Michael about how well the budget process works now, and I have sat in on some finance committee meetings, and I know they're working on this a lot to keep it on track. My biggest concern about it, I suppose, is that once again, that the dues pay for basic services, which we all want and need. Above and beyond that, I think the biggest thing that's going to come at us and affect our dues is going to be special issues that come up, whether it be tree removal or maybe possibly something to do with telecommunications. And we need to be constantly aware, I think, that the dues management is handled really well by staff and finance committee, people on board with financial expertise. And what we need to be considering at all times and keep our eye on is that we don't get sort of sideswiped. It's much better for us to have the dues go up. If they're going to go up $2 a year, $3 a year, $5 a year, something like that. To have the dues go up $20, $30, or $40 a year, I think would be really difficult for the membership, and take it, make a big dent in a lot of people's ability to live well. So that's the kind of thing that I would like to see that we stay aware of, and really think about how we would handle that kind of thing. And so that's probably enough said. I think that we're doing a good job with our budget, but I know that in the future there are things that are going to come at us.
Okay, this one I'm going to address to Drew first. Over the next, this sort of follows up on what you've been discussing with the budget. Over the next year, serious, expensive programs may be competing for board approval. For example, vegetation management, tree removal, broadband expansion, website security, infrastructure repair and maintenance. Do you ever see a situation where a direct vote of the membership on competing expenditures would be desirable? Various committees conduct polls on different aspects of the work that they're doing, that they're carrying out, and I'm just wondering if you feel that the board would ever initiate such an experiment.
I would say conditionally yes, but I would make a careful distinction between basically placing the budget or any part of the budget to a binding vote. An advisory poll, yes. I think that would be, in fact, I think with the advances in polling technology, the ability to do very effective and inexpensive polling online, I think that one of the things I would like to see us do is do more polling of our membership, not only on budgetary priorities, but on other issues as well. We had a good example recently with the poll that the Utilities Committee conducted on high-speed internet, which got a remarkable response, and on which what was it, 94% of sea ranchers agreed that this was a high priority. And can you imagine 94% of sea ranchers agreeing on anything? But I think there is room for that kind of input would be very valuable in situations where the board does need or desire some member input. But the board shouldn't be punting their responsibility to the membership on a regular basis. We are electing them to make those decisions, but I think using polling wisely would be a good idea.
Michael?
I agree completely. This is a representative democracy, not a commune. And I believe that part of the board's charge is to fully inform itself as to all matters, and then, having been elected, to make decisions on behalf of the membership. I agree that as much polling as we can get that gives us data of opinions of the membership is important, but I don't believe that the ultimate final decision as to budgets should be up for a popular vote.
Robert, anything else?
Yeah, I'd just like to add that my criteria for this kind of thing is that whenever the Sea Ranch thinks it's wise to embark on a large project, the goal should be to look for how the benefits accrue to Sea Ranch from that investment. So that's the standard, and I don't know if the best way to do that isn't to have a committee or a group who has really investigated that aspect of things and then present it to the membership and the board in an open meeting and discuss it, but with real data, real analysis. One of the things that's happened here, if you've seen what's happened in the past, well, the Solar Array Task Force came up with a great plan, and we actually implemented it, and we're making a good revenue base off of that that's helping to pay for itself. So, you know, that was impressive, and I think there's other things like that that we can do. I think one of the problems that we would have if we opened it up in a general way to the membership and say, should we vote on this or not, is that we might not get the kind of real analysis and dedicated thought that we need in order to make that kind of a decision. So I think it's the board's ultimate responsibility, of course, to do that, and I think that that's, of course, important and good, because we do have financial people, and we do have a board that's very smart. I ran a business for many years, and we certainly were successful at the end. But after, 15 cents an hour, which is what you get. But basically, we need to keep that in mind, is that we have talent here, incredible talent. Finance committee people, other people, and we need to use that talent to keep us informed and make decisions wisely at that level.
I'm going to try to combine two of these questions because I think they're somewhat complementary. There's been a lot of discussion recently about a pedestrian bicycle bridge over the Scarola River and a bike path through the Sea Ranch. Do you think that's feasible, and how much involvement should the association have in this project and in the development of the bike path? Should there be a budgetary limit on this proposal? At the same time, is there an issue, a privacy issue, that should be looked at with regard to the bike path and to increase public access to Bluff Trail or relocation of Bluff Trail as well? That's for you, Michael.
Along with the biomass converter, I'm intrigued by the concept of the bike trail. I believe that all the interests that you talked about need to be protected, and that this is something that would need to be studied. However, I would be in favor of finding a way, if at all possible, protecting people's privacy and keeping the costs within control, and perhaps getting grants from various agencies that would be interested in making this part of a larger system, to perhaps get a bike trail just to the east of Highway 1, and to end up with a way to get across the river to Walla via pedestrian and bike path. Not only would it add to the amenities available to people here at the Sea Ranch, but one of the interesting things about in reading the recent CEP and talking about potential disaster problems is, if we were to be cut off, how do we get to Walla if that bridge comes down? And to have an additional artery that would allow us access to town in the event of emergency, I think is a great idea. I also think that it fits into our basic vision to enhance the ability to use non-carbon polluting methods of transportation, like walking and riding a bicycle. So I would be in favor of looking into that, keeping, of course, the issues of expense and privacy and setting precedent in terms of making parts of our commons available for more generalized purposes. The part of the question having to do with the bluff trail, I see those as really two different things. And I think one of the big issues we're going to have to be dealing with coming up pretty soon is, of course, the issue with the bluff trail and bluff trail erosion. I think we're going to be limited into the degree, nor would I advocate limiting public access where it already exists. But the problem with public access to walk on beaches is going to be something that we are going to have to be facing. I think that the bluff trail issue is one that we'll be looking at, and I look forward to getting the data to find the best solution to those problems.
Do you want to take a crack at it, Drew?
Sure. I think that the bike trail on Highway 1 is going to happen sooner or later, and our choice is whether we're at the table or not. In other words, whether we have a voice in how it's implemented or whether it is done to us. I think that if we do participate in this process, I think it will be very positive for Sea Ranch as well as for our interactions with the surrounding communities. I think we sometimes forget, there's sometimes a tendency to think of Sea Ranch as an island and to think that we're somehow not interrelated with the surrounding communities, and each and every one of us is a member of, you could visualize them as circles of communities, and sometimes they're concentric, sometimes they're overlapping. We're all in the middle circle of Sea Ranch. We're also all in the next concentric circle out, which is a resident of the Mendonoma coast. Some of us have overlapping circles into the Bay Area. All of us have overlapping circles into other various interest groups. So we're definitely not an island. It behooves us to get along with our neighbors as well as we can. And also I happen to think that the idea of a bike trail along Highway 1 is a good idea. I'd like to see a bike trail along the entire length of Highway 1. Of course, that's not our business, but the 10 miles that goes through Sea Ranch is partially our business. I think we should be very careful. We shouldn't just jump in and volunteer to build it and pay for it all ourselves. But I think if we work with Caltrans, with other funding entities, I think we would find that we would wind up with a good product, as well as something that could fit into our budget. Yeah, I guess that's it.
Thanks. Well, we need to keep in mind there's two issues here. There's the Highway 1 bike trail, which is the public trail on the Caltrans has rights to the easement for, but we also don't have an immediate thing happening there. Mendocino County is really moving forward with a bike trail all the way down Highway 1. And they have just, they have a proposal. One of the parts of that proposal is for $14 million to build a bridge over the Walla River, because the county line is between Sonoma and, of course, Mendocino County, right in the middle of the river. And so they want to extend that, but Sonoma County doesn't have that kind of plan in place for a bike trail. Now, one of the interesting things is we could be a little proactive here. One of my concerns is that right now, it's the fire break is where we're kind of talking about. If it gets into Sea Ranch, it could be in the fire break. But, you know, there's a possibility that we could be a little proactive and possibly actually get funding to do that, or grant money to do that. I think we need to be careful that we don't, that whatever we do as an association and as a board, we understand the larger implications from state legislator point of view, from public scrutiny point of view, from county point of view. I agree with Drew about the need to connect this up regionally, and I would love to have a way to walk or bike across the river to get to Guava. I think that's very important. But when it comes to larger issues like putting a bike trail all the way down Highway 1, well, we're gonna have to work that out internally with our association about people who are concerned about privacy. And one of the biggest things that is a driving force here is the safety of bike riders. I mean, that is so important. We don't, any of us want to pull out. I don't want to pull out in Halcyon and see somebody laying on the street. You know, it's really important that we look at that as a possible event if we don't, you know, be a little proactive here about that. So I really think it's going to deserve some study, consideration, and in fact, it's already happening to some extent. People are looking at that. The other side of the coin is the internal bike path through Sea Ranch. That's a different story. That has to do with us. It has to do with what we want and how we would manage that kind of thing to go through our existing lots and properties. And that's a whole different category, and again, something that we need to discuss, but that does have a lot of appeal to avoid so much car traffic to get from point A to point B in Sea Ranch. And then the other thing, the bluff erosion thing is really actually quite a complicated little issue, because when Sea Ranch got that easement, got the right from the vein, through the vein bill to not have public trails, it was done on the basis of a surveyed easement. It does not follow the contour of the bluff, it's a surveyed easement. So what's happening is that as bluff erosion comes in, it's going through that surveyed easement line and encroaching onto Sea Ranch property, and now in some cases private property. So working that out again is something that we need to really understand the implications of and see what we can move, what we can't move. Or is there a way to allow access from Guala Point Park to Walk-On Beach, which is what the county is really interested in for public access easement. And that's going to take some negotiation, because I don't think Sea Ranch wants to turn over ownership of that easement to the county. But what we want to do is make it possible, if there's a way to do that, for that to happen. A lot of things we looked at in the past, riprap, all kinds of things, it's been too expensive. So the question now becomes, how do you fix that problem without, and what we don't want to do is say, well, absolutely not, we're not going to, allow that to happen unless we want to kick up some fuss, possibly with.
Robert, I'm going to have to
Okay,
stop.
I'll stop. So we just need to consider these things from a lot of points of view.
Okay, the next one is a very short yes or no answer. Do you feel that the listserv and the buzz are positive and appropriate venues for issue discussion by candidates? Yes or no, Michael?
Yes and no questions are always tough because I'm sorry, I can't answer that yes or no, but I'll answer it very shortly. I think the listservs and the buzz are a fine place for a candidate to post their views, but not to have discussions of their views.
True.
No.
Robert?
No, I think this is a public community, a community of public forums and public discussions.
Okay, thank you. Do you think that the board has any role to play in a discussion of tree removal on private lots? Start with Robert.
Well, I think the design committee has already spelled out in great detail how that works and what the parameters for it are. And the McBride report actually talks some about that. And I think that the board's role here needs to be to look at the implications of what's happening with people and understand what the considerations that are facing people. I know there's people who feel that they should be able to take down trees or to remove neighbors' trees or do things like that. And I think that we've taken a lot of effort in the past years to try to come up with a way to handle that that is not going to be, personally good for one person and not for another. We have to keep in mind that, you know, we are mutual benefit, community development, interest development, and there's a whole vegetation scheme and habitat here. So I don't know if the board by itself can simply step in and start making those kinds of, or should step in and start making those kinds of decisions. I'd much rather see that go through the process that exists, and if there's problems with that, then we maybe need to say, okay, it's time to really have public discussion about this, have more forums, have an interest, really address this in some intelligent way so we all understand the bigger picture here and what the implications are. So I don't think the board has an absolute direct role there. I think the board has a very, though, interested and supportive role for any member who is having trouble and is feeling somehow, you know, not being taken care of.
Drew?
I think this goes back to a question that we discussed earlier about the proper role of the board and staff, the division of duties and responsibilities. The board has responsibilities for setting policies with regard to tree removal, and they can also participate in the development of something along the lines of what I was talking about earlier in terms of a view protocol. That can be an appropriate thing for the board to get involved with, but the decisions on proposals to remove trees on private property, or for that matter on commons, is properly handled by staff.
I agree.
Yeah, but I'm going to leave you with one sort of forward-thinking question, and then we will, at the end of this question, we will take a 10-minute break, and at the end of that break, you come back, and then it's your turn to forward questions to the candidates. So let's finish up with this one. How do you envision Sea Ranch to be in its second 50 years? For example, demographically, its environmental impacts, its information and personal data security issues. How do you want us to be remembered in 2065? And do you see any conflict of more assumption of the role of a municipality being taken over by Sea Ranch itself as it plays this equal role of actually providing some of those things? So do a little blue sky here. Let's start with Drew.
Okay. I think that demographically we will continue the trends that we've seen, which is more full-time people. I think perhaps in 50 years we might be majority full-time, and therefore we might have a much younger population and a population that a much higher percent of our members are still working full-time and working from their homes. I think, I would hope that we could, I mean, this would be my dream, is that 50 years from now, we still have the same philosophy of living lightly on the land, and we're still honoring that. I think we have honored that for the most part for the last 50 years. It hasn't been perfect. My hope would be that in another 50 years we could ask ourselves, have we continued to be true to that, and to answer yes. As far as becoming more like a municipality, I don't see us ever becoming a municipality. I think that there's a showstopper there, by the way. Regardless of whatever other arguments you might make in favor, that one might make in favor of becoming a municipality, is that if we're a municipality, the only people who get to vote are the people who are registered to vote here, which is the full-time people, which means me, Michael, and probably half the people in this room are disenfranchised. So to me, that ends the discussion of becoming a municipality. But I think there could be selective functions that the Sea Ranch Association, that what you might call municipal type functions, such as, we already own a water department, a water company. There could be other such opportunities in the future that would need to be very carefully analyzed, but there could be cases made for such moves in the future. I don't even know what they might be, but I would be open to considering that.
Okay, Drew? I'm sorry, Michael?
Along with Drew, I would hope that we can maintain the vision that makes this place special to us and why most, if not all of us, are here through the next 50 years. I don't believe it's realistic to think that we will become much younger in terms of our demographic, especially in light of the issue around schools. So you're not really going to get families here with kids to a large degree. What I would love to see in a blue sky kind of concept would be development of opportunities for people to stay here and not have to move away as we age. And that has to do primarily with the medical issues that have been brought up, and also with some sort of low-cost housing, senior housing option. I know that there are still places on this ranch that are as yet still open for development, and I would love to see a task force to look into the possibility of some sort of senior housing with the smaller units and one story that will allow the people who come here and plan to stay here as long as they are here to stay longer and not have to move away. That'd be my blue sky. Thank you.
I like your blue sky. I'm getting closer to that blue sky. Robert?
My children's grandchildren will be here, yes. I would like to see, I'm hopeful that the Sea Ranch will kind of change its philosophy this one bit. Instead of living likely on the land, living likely with the land. I really think that as we grow and change, our biodiversity, our special native flora and fauna, our ability to garden this place and to make it a really special, unique place, more than it even is now in the world, that people will go, wow, that is amazing what happened there. And that's my sort of blue sky vision. And for us folks, the people who live here, it's one of the reasons I'm so interested in telecommunications and broadband services. There was a really interesting video I just saw, a friend of mine gave it to me, about wireless medicine. It really opened my eyes to this fella, Eric Topol. He's a doctor who is now using apps to do things like blood, sweat, saliva, urine tests, all this incredible stuff over the phone, and eliminating so much of the need to travel, to go to specialty doctors, et cetera, et cetera. So as we make advances in that way, and as we bring Sea Ranch up over these next years to that kind of level, we may, in fact, encourage people to be able to stay here and come here and live here and not have to worry so much about medical services, although we'll always have the need and for urgent care services especially, and for that kind of thing. But I hope that we can, look down that future and say, wow, these things are not opposite. A biodiverse, wonderful, landscape that people treasure, which is why a lot of people come here, and the ability to support that with good services and telecommunications, those things all go together to making this a rich and creative and wonderful place to live, more than it is. Just keep going down that road.
Drew, did I get you?
Yep. Okay, I'm going to ask you all now to be very quiet in your potty break. There's coffee in the back of the room. Please be back here at 4:14.
4:14.
So that's exactly 10 minutes. So we can continue.
be careful with it, so that it isn't dripping down. First, the forum next May, May 4th, is not just about medical emergencies, but general emergencies at Sea Ranch. And we're going to allow folks from the general region to participate in this one because it is of general interest. What happens when you call 911 basically is going to be the topic. And on a somewhat related topic, as many of you have heard, Mendocino County is currently considering setting up a district for emergency services countywide. And there's going to be a meeting about that at the Walla Community Center, which is where the pay and take is, at 6 p.m. a week Monday, the 16th. And I have very strong opinions about that. I won't express them today. But those who are interested in this issue, which I think is very, very important for the services that we do have, I urge you to attend. I'm going to be out of town, so go and represent us. Thank you.
All right, now it's your turn. You can take these gentlemen to task on any of the topics that they've already discussed or any others that you wish to ask them. I would ask you to limit your question to no more than 2 minutes. Please do not use it as an opportunity to tell us all how you feel about things, but rather ask our candidates their feelings. I'm going to try to keep a close eye on the 2-minute clock, and we'll begin with the first questioner.
You can ask people to identify themselves?
Yes, please, since we are being taped today, videotape, please do introduce yourself and give your unit block number. Also, the DVDs will be available by Tuesday of this meeting for any of your friends who were unable to attend. And the mailing cost will be somewhere between $2 and $3 to have them mailed, and they can be picked up at 62.
No, 92. We'll send out an email with directions.
And Walt will send an email with all of the directions. Okay, does anybody have a question? Oh, they did a good job. Oh, no.
Somebody has to do it, I suppose.
Somebody has to be first.
Okay, what are these two chairs doing here? What are you
You'll have to ask the staff about that. They set the room.
I'm normal. Is one reserved for Clint Eastwood? Who's that? Okay, as we finished the last session, Michael touched on senior housing, his thoughts on senior housing. And due to the time consideration, the other candidates didn't have a chance to express their opinions. It's certainly a subject, as you well know, that's come up more than once in the past, and it seems to go round and round, and where the music stops, who knows? So would you be willing to comment on that, your views on that as a board member?
And you're addressing this to all three of them?
Yes, I am.
All right, let's start with Robert.
I think the concept of senior housing is great. The implementation of it seems to be a little bit harder because of what we've seen as the medical issues of how we actually do that. Now, that's not to say we couldn't see if there's possibilities for housing that would actually be more supportive of senior lifestyles. And there's, some areas on the Sea Ranch that might be amenable to smaller houses, to houses that are easier to move around in, that kind of thing. People I've talked to, have been concerned that of the continuing care, I guess is what it's called, that seniors are afforded. If you start to get sick or you have a disease or something happens that you need further care, how do you implement that here? And I think that's probably the biggest stop to it, or the biggest problem that we have with it. I personally would like to be carried out in a canoe, and so, but how to do that is really interesting, and so I really like the concept, and I think it's a wonderful thing that we need to try to do. I just am not clear yet about the best way to go about it. It's a regional issue as much as it is our issue on the Sea Ranch. It's something we really have to figure out with the local medical services and a lot of other support services. So.
Drew?
I would add to what Robert said, and I think he had wise words there. Obviously, in any, considering any new, significant new enterprise that the association might, or Sea Ranch in whatever form might enter into, requires careful analysis and costing, number crunching. But also I think we need to, another element of that is since we're almost certainly talking here, what we're talking here when we're saying senior housing is senior housing with some medical element to it, because in effect we kind of already have senior housing. It's our houses. But adding the medical element, I think it would be important to look for a partner, and the obvious partner, of course, is RCMS, just across the river. I'm, by the way, a member of the Finance and Audit Committees at RCMS. I can attest to the fact that it's a well-run, dedicated organization, and I would see no reason for us to try and reinvent the wheel in terms of medical care. They're already offering visiting nurse services on Sea Ranch and elsewhere in the area. So I think it is an emerging, important issue. I would like to see us tackle it, probably in the form of some kind of a task force, but I think it's very important that we look to partnering with, most likely with RCMS and anything we might consider.
So the response that I gave was a question regarding blue sky for the next 50 years. I don't know that, I believe senior housing is an issue that's important to members of the association, but I don't know that it's really an association issue or an issue that would be dealt with by a board of directors, other than perhaps putting out the idea and making private companies and or not-for-profit companies aware of the possibility of developing some sort of units somewhere here on the Sea Ranch. I don't believe we want to be in the business of doing that as an association, but our receptiveness to it, to the medical issues, I was intrigued by the comments made about the new availabilities of technology and the kinds of things that are going to be able to be done in the future, and I agree with that. So, blue sky, I see some senior housing that is more easily livable as we get older, somewhere here on the Sea Ranch. I believe that the board's only real role in that is to attempt to facilitate it and to be receptive to outside interests that might want to develop that kind of thing.
Do you feel that there are any things that the board could be involved with at this time that would enable seniors to live a better life up here, such as better lighted intersections, signs that we can read at night? Things such as
I would definitely like to see an improvement in signs that we can read at night. I think that's a big issue. I think the use of red reflectors at certain places is probably a good idea. It's the only way I find my way off of Highway 1 up to my street. It's my street, I go past it, but for the red reflectors. So I think certainly there are things that can be improved here within the Sea Ranch that are the association's business. I just don't see it being the housing concept.
I think one of the most intriguing things to me as I get older and feel my need for more sort of healthy exercise and that kind of thing is more access to paths and trails that are really sort of conducive for that. And what I mean is that if we did have something like an easy bike trail that went through Sea Ranch, or an ability to walk downtown, or those kinds of things, I think it would really enhance the ability of people to live longer. Because that was one of the interesting things about when I saw this video. The doctor said, you know, we have all this new apps and this new technology, and we can monitor you, and we can, you know, monitor your heart and all this stuff. He said, of course, I exercise 1 hour every day, no matter what. And that's what has kept me more healthy than anything else. So when it comes down to it, if we want to be, you know, active seniors, and we want to stay active seniors, it's partly the housing, it's partly the help that we can get locally, and it's partly making what the board can do is maybe, you know, work with staff and work with trails committees and people who are here to make sure that we have the means to get around for as long as we can. And I think, because that's what does most seniors in, is we stop moving. I'm running all the time lately.
Everybody stand up, up, down.
Okay, John.
Yeah, and just to add, I mean, I think the only thing I would say here is that there are, I would agree with what both of my colleagues here have said, but maybe I'll just take a minute to give a pitch for CRC, which is an existing program that if you're not aware of it, it provides drivers for people who need rides to medical appointments, both locally and as far away as Santa Rosa and Fort Bragg. I'm a volunteer driver, and the way I look at it is I'm putting some karma in the bank for when I'm going to need to make a withdrawal someday. And this is really important. I mean, the clients that I have driven are able to remain at Sea Ranch in large part because of that program. Has nothing to do with running for the board, but it's important.
We'll take a little pitch any place we can. Michael, did you have anything? Yes.
Who's next? Oh, someone's getting up.
Hi, my name is Barry Richmond, Unit 18, Lot 79. I'm curious if any of the candidates have a view of the adequacy of our security and whether it needs to be changed in any way.
Are you addressing this to all three of them?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Start with Michael.
My only experience with the security has been positive. I've been fortunate enough not to have to need it, other than in one medical emergency that I was involved with, and they were very, very responsive. If finances were not an issue, there are all sorts of higher levels of security that might be available to us. But I think in balance, in terms of what we pay for it, in terms of what we get for it, I think our security system, at least in terms of results, I've never seen the data, nor have I studied the security system to the point of understanding fully where holes might be. But in my experience here at Sea Ranch over 25 years, my interactions with security have only been positive. They've done things that I thought needed to be dealt with, have been dealt with, and in a timely way. So as far as I can see right now, it seems to be working.
Drew?
Actually, coincidentally, I had one of the meetings I've had with TSRA managers was with Louise DeWilder yesterday, and she gave me a very good introduction, very thorough introduction to everything I didn't already know about the way the Sea Ranch security functions. And one of the things that she pointed out, which I was aware of, is that in not too many years ago, we had 24-hour security patrols. Those were discontinued, and Louise sort of smiled and said she doesn't like to publicize the hours that are not subject to patrols anymore. But anyway, but it's kind of in the middle of the night, as you might imagine, and it was a cost benefit kind of an equation, and I think that could be revisited from time to time, like any other. I think any decision to either increase, stop, increase, curtail services should be subject to reanalysis periodically, and I think that probably it would be a candidate for reevaluation at some time during the term of the two people you elect in this election. Other than that, I think the daytime and the coverage during the hours that the security services are operating I think it's good. I'm not aware of any problems. I'd certainly like to become aware of any problems if anyone ever perceives them, but they seem to be working well to me. I think the main issue is whether we want to go back to 24 hours or not.
We've had really good experiences with security where we live, and so I don't really see anything that I don't feel is adequately covered. I think there may be some need in the future to talk more about speeders, and as we grow as a community, it could be that we'll end up having to look more at how we deal with things like traffic through Sea Ranch and speeding and those kinds of issues. And I'm not sure, where that's going exactly, but I can see as more people come here, and it's just dramatic how much we change over a holiday weekend, or as visitors come in more, and then all of a sudden you're dealing with people who don't recognize that, well, there aren't stop signs at a lot of these places. There is speed limits. And so then I don't know if the security patrols may need to get actually beefed up more during those times, or exactly how that works. But that's probably the biggest thing I see on a day-to-day basis. It seems to be pretty well done.
Thank you.
I'm Senator Walker, 14-3-14. There's an elephant in the living room. I'm surprised no one's asked a question about burning housing. I am not going to ask it, however. My question is about the Ralph M. Brown Act is essentially California's open meeting law and our basic Sunshine Act. It governs most public jurisdictions in the state, from the largest down to, well, even CLSD, for example, is covered by the Ralph M. Brown Act. The difference between what we do here under David Sterling and what the Brown Act is, the Brown Act specifies what is private and non-public: contract negotiations, personnel records, that type of thing, legal matters. The David Sterling Act says what things are public, and then all the rest is private. I'm wondering if board members would be amenable to adopting, as long as it's now apparently not much of an issue, if it would be amenable to adopting the provisions of the Ralph M. Brown Act to apply to the government of the association. Anybody?
I think I'd have to. One of the things I like to point out is, and that I will be pointing out in my closing statement, is that I don't know everything yet, and I would like to, as they say, take that under advisement, because I can't honestly give you an informed answer on that. But I would like to study up and be able to.
I'm not sure, is that something that we as a board, as an association, could even decide to do? Or
I am not the person to answer the legal aspects of that. What I believe you could do, if you could not adopt as an applicable rule, you could certainly adopt the provisions of it, I would think, by resolution.
Oh, I see. I don't know, that, I have to look at it, I guess, that's true.
I too would have to look at it and really compare the two and see what the differences were. And certainly I believe that if in comparing the two, there were some items that are private under Dave Sterling, but under Brown Act would be public. Then on a case-by-case basis, I would look at those and see if it was in the best interest of the association to make those things public. There are certain things that are kept private for a good reason. And it would, to me, what we would have to do is look at the differences and then apply that reasoning to any particular items where there was a difference before we decide that.
Well, thank you, and I would urge you to look at it, because I think it's worth it.
Thank you, Thayer.
And I, 35D3, I'd like to ask you about the elephant in the room. What do you see, what would you like to see happen at Burbank Housing, and how do you think we might get there?
Who wants to start with the elephant? Michael?
So before I became a teacher, I was a lawyer for 26 years. I retired into teaching because I wanted kids to get me sick. And in the past month or so, since whatever the period of time is since we started this process, I've gotten into the more specifics of Burbank than I had previously, just as an association member that listened to various rumors and heard occasional things about how it was problematic. And so as I've looked into it as best I can in this short period, it is problematic. But it was actually fascinating for me, after being out of law for 15 years, to once again delve into what is essentially, in many ways, to my mind, a legal issue. And I think, in my experience as a lawyer, there was almost always a way that can be found through things. Often it requires cooperation or compromise, which may not be the same as cooperation. And finding the various stakeholders. I think it's a really good sign that we've hired a specific counsel recently, who I'm hoping is having some of the same ideas that I'm having as to possible ways to deal with this. I think it's going to be an issue we're going to have to deal with, if it happens the way I conceive of it happening. We have two different things we're going to have to decide as an association. One is the legal issue, and the other are the moral issues. We may get to the point where we can find a way in terms of the law to get ourselves out of this crunch. But then we're going to have to decide if the way out involves something that we might not really want to do to people. And so I think those are two things that lie for us in the future. My own personal belief is that we should first need to define, without looking at the morality of it, not saying it's not there, but just put that to the side for the moment and figure out what our legal rights are and how to get there. And then give a very real and considered consideration, once we figure that out, as to whether or not we want to exercise our legal rights to the full extent that may be possible. I am very hopeful. Again, as a lawyer, I know that there's all sorts of things I don't know about this, and I'm always reticent to make decisions with only half the knowledge. But as a member of the board, I am sure that I would learn more. And in conjunction with the recently hired counsel, I believe that there are ways to deal with this issue.
Jerry?
I agree on the first and foremost point that it's absolutely essential that we get our foundation, our legal foundation under us. It's I mean, this is clearly a very complex issue. Otherwise, I think we would have figured out the legal foundation already, because there have been a lot of intelligent people looking at this for a number of years. And so I echo Michael's statement that that I am very glad that we have special counsel on board to deal with that. I suppose you might argue, well, maybe we should have brought special counsel on board earlier, but then of course it didn't really become a legal, kind of really formally a legal issue until Burbank defaulted on their association assessment. But setting that aside, first and foremost, the priority is to, as I've liked to put it recently when I've been talking to people, is what we must do legally, what we must not do legally, and analyze all the stuff legally in between as to what their consequences are. We need to get that foundation under us before we start verbalizing or testing out possible ways out. And it also will involve, almost certainly will involve negotiation. It will also involve a recognition. I mean, I think sea ranchers are starting to come around to coming to terms with the fact that we really are a stakeholder in this, whether we want to be or not. Even if you could argue that previously we weren't, I would not argue that previously we weren't, but if you wanted to argue that prior to February 1st we weren't a stakeholder, we sure are now, to the tune of $102,000 a year. So also morally we're a stakeholder. I agree with that aspect of what Michael said too. So I think we need to get our legal feet underneath us. We need to be thorough in the process of analyzing the situation, and throughout our search for a solution, one thing we really need to be careful to not allow ourselves to do is to penalize the residents there in any way. It's not their fault. They are in fact still paying rent to Burbank Housing, while Burbank is sort of in a way not paying rent to us. So it sure is not their fault. And they're members of our community, so let's not punish the tenants for the sins of the landlord. And thirdly, I think it also behooves us to be aware that in the coming months, because this is becoming a legal issue, the board is not going to be able to speak as thoroughly, as completely publicly as they may wish to, and as you may wish them to. But it's not generally a good idea to air your legal strategy in a potentially contentious situation for your potential opponent to read.
Robert?
Thanks, Watt. As Ida knows, I live probably as close to Burbank Housing as anybody, in fact closer than anybody on Sea Ranch. And I know those folks that live over there fairly well, some of them. And it's a very interesting situation, because when we invoke the Larry Halpern sort of motto, oh boy, you didn't have to buy here, you could have bought anywhere. And when we talk about sea ranchers, we tend to forget that for the Burbank Housing people, that may or may not be it's not the case. And who are they and what are they doing? Now it's in a legal situation right now because of the dues not being paid. But I have no comment about that. I'm hoping this attorney, Don Kelly, is really going to be good at good negotiator. He's not hired as a litigator, he's hired as a negotiator. But I think as we go through the process, there's some guidelines for me that are very important. One is not to generate ill will. We don't want to generate ill will, either with Burbank, the county, or the public. We need to figure out a way to negotiate here that is going to be good for everybody. Now, I don't know what the solution is. There's a lot of different ways this could go, and we're just guessing because The main thing we don't have is enough information at this point. I spent 6 months with a group, a private little group that we met independently to try to figure out what to do with Burbank housing. We developed a spreadsheet of options that, and many of them not having to do with Sea Ranch so much as private individuals and equity investing, all kinds of things. And we couldn't get where we wanted to go because we simply didn't know. Burbank is an owner, just like you or me. And so they have their right to their privacy and all the rest of it. And so that's the fact that this is in a place where maybe we can find some of this information out. Maybe the board can find some of that information out. Excuse me, is going to be very helpful. I hope we can engage the county. I really do, because I feel like they're one of the stakeholders. Burbank is run by the Community Development Corporation of Sonoma County. The board of supervisors of Sonoma County is the board of the Community Development Corporation of Sonoma County. So it's like they are directly involved in this, and I hope that we can work somehow with them on a solution that does not involve litigation. My biggest concern is that we end up in litigation, we end up spending, God knows, hundreds of thousands of dollars in litigation, and we didn't fix what we could have fixed. And I would be so sad to see it go down that way, and I hope it doesn't. I hope we can work it out to use what's going to be an expensive solution instead of litigating it to make it, to solve it. And, I also really believe that it's not going to do anybody any good if this all ends up on the front page of the Press Democrat. I'd much rather have it, worked out, negotiated, and everybody comes out looking, like they've made a reasonable effort, and the people there don't get, as Drew said, really trashed in all this, and so somehow we're going to have to find some real middle grounds here and work with our consulting attorney and come up with some answers that hopefully this will get resolved. I have faith it can, but it takes a lot of background knowledge. This, the plan we got from Burbank was the 5th plan, right, in 10 years. And we really need to look at this now from a calm, objective, how do we solve this point of view?
Thank you. Are there any other questions? If not, I'm going to ask just one more question to the 3 candidates, and that is, how have you prepared yourself to be a board member for the Sea Ranch Association?
Well, for me, there's been the long-term preparation and the short-term. Long-term are the things that I've done in my life that have gotten me to a place where I can bring a certain skill set to the board. And that's the skill set of someone who practices a lawyer for 25 years, who has been a teacher for 15 years, who likes working with people, who knows what it means to be objective, and who is able to bring that objective viewpoint to a place where they can discuss tough matters with other people. In the short term, I've learned more about the Sea Ranch, where typical of most of us, I've been coming up here for 30 years, and we've owned a house here for 6 years, before that renting, and I thought I really knew the Sea Ranch. But what I've actually really enjoyed about this process, and didn't know I was getting into when I signed up for it, was to come to a much deeper understanding of what the Sea Ranch is all about. And I'm really, really impressed, actually, with how complex it is and what a really good job we do in most things in dealing with that complexity. In the short term, I've been madly reading the recent CEP of trying to figure out all those things. Thank you.
Drew?
Well, I guess your question assumes that I am prepared, but I'm a guy who always, I mean, as my wife can can tell you, I just study things and chew on things until there's nothing left to chew on. I'm a very thorough researcher. So I've been, I do feel I've done some sort of pre-work in terms of being on the finance committee at TSRA, as well as at RCMS and the audit committee in there. But specifically for the TSRA board, I think my fairly short period on the finance committee has been very valuable. It just happened that we tackled the day after I was appointed to the finance committee. We had had a 5-hour meeting across the way here to do some brainstorming about a project that's still ongoing to try to develop a 5-year business plan. And the process of that session and subsequent discussions, I got kind of a crash course in every issue that either is a real issue facing the Sea Ranch or even a fantasy issue facing the Sea Ranch. Because, you know, in brainstorming, everything goes up on the wall. So I think that was a good crash course. Since I have declared my candidacy, I have been meeting with as many experts and knowledgeable people as I can, attending every committee meeting that I can. I think looking around the room, I've probably met with or talked to half the people here and picked your brains, and I very much appreciate that. And I had already read the draft CEP, now I'm into the final one. I've read the McCalley report. It's an outstanding piece of work, and reading the milestones publications at the TSRA office, everything I can get my hands on.
Thank you. Robert? Please don't tell me you've read the draft CEP.
No, I didn't write the CEP. So that's part of what the preparation has been. Nancy and I have attended every board meeting for the last 2 years, except one. I've been on the planning committee, the farm committee, the election committee, and did help write the 2013 CEP, which is now on the website. So that's been my Sea Ranch preparation. I have always, dedicated myself to being open-minded and willing to discuss issues and willing to engage in conversations with people. And my preparation, my direct preparation for being on board has been trying to get more sleep. But it's, I very much like Sea Ranch. I love Sea Ranch. And so my preparation is really, that I would like to serve in a capacity of helping to keep the vision going here.
If there are no further questions from audience members, then we'll move on to the closing statements. And the closing statements will begin with Robert, followed by Michael, and Richard.
I'm not going to use my closing statement to make campaign promises about issues. Instead, I'd like to focus on the decision-making process. I don't see the world as black and white. Every problem we encounter is more complex than that. As a community, we need to balance our decisions and choices in order to benefit all of us to the greatest extent possible. We don't want to move too fast, but we don't want to go too slow. We want to be modern without destroying the beauty of the land. We need to be frugal and yet invest in projects that will keep our future costs down. Such are the dichotomies of governing a community of some 4,000 or more owners. Trying to get something accomplished has many facets. We need to define the content of the task at hand, analyze the costs, raise the funds, figure out how to fairly prioritize the benefits, and plot a timeline. It's not impossible, it's not impossible, and it's just not simple. The health of our community is directly related to our communication with each other and to the trust we can build among ourselves. It takes patience, diligence, and collaboration to get things done. We need to respect the people who participate and trust them to work in our best interests. We have room here at Sea Ranch for number crunchers, visionaries, artists, planners, architects, builders, engineers, environmentalists, experts in every field, and people who just want to relax. The prosperity of the community affects us all. I consciously chose to live at Sea Ranch because I love living close to nature. I chose Sea Ranch because of the dedicated membership. And I chose Sea Ranch because I believe we have a philosophy and founding documents that help guide us as we try to preserve and build on what we have here. This has been a really good forum. I know I have a lot to learn. I also know that I'm willing to learn from all of you and from study and inquiry in order to have enough substantive information to make decisions for the benefit of Sea Ranch. I think the job of being a board member would be challenging and time-consuming and rewarding. I'm willing to do the job and hope you'll vote for me.
So, the good news for you guys is that I don't think you can make a bad choice here. That's the good news. I've been really impressed by both of these gentlemen and their dedication and their intelligence, and in the short time we've had together, I would feel comfortable voting for either of them. So the good news is you can't make a bad choice. If you're interested in taking advantage of the skill set that I bring, which I've already told you, it's the skill set of having been a lawyer for as long as I was, having an open mind, willing to work hard, and willing to build on a fascination that even at this point is growing in me with the Sea Ranch and how it works and how it does what it does and how well it does what it does, that I appreciate and enjoy the opportunity to help it keep going in a positive direction. I think generally it is, and I'm willing to spend the time and energy to do that if you'd like me to. So if you would, cast your vote for me. Thank you.
In closing, I'd just like to return to what has sort of been the theme of my campaign, which is I'm the finance guy. And I think I bring a skill set to the board that is valuable for the board. I think I can provide excellent representation for you, as well as providing that skill set to addressing the problems that Sea Ranch faces. And I was thinking, I just finished writing my, besides that, I thought, well, how can I just sort of close out? And I just wrote my second candidate's statement, and I thought, well, the last paragraph I thought said it pretty well, so I think I'll quote from myself, which I guess I can, I'm not going to be misquoted, right? So, anyway, here it is. Let me emphasize that my positions on the issues we have discussed here are not etched in stone. Some of them may not even be fully formed yet. A lot of homework is involved. My approach is to analyze issues as carefully and fully as possible before reaching a conclusion. But even then, I remain open to further data, inputs, and insights, and am willing and able to adjust my thinking accordingly. You may not agree with everything I say or do as a candidate or as a member of your board, but you can be assured that I will arrive at all of my positions and actions in an honest, open-minded, conscientious, and responsive way. So thank you for your kind attention. I would appreciate your vote, and I actually would echo Michael's statement. I think you did, in my opinion, I would feel comfortable voting for any two of the three of us. So I think you have a happy decision ahead of you.
I would like to also express my thanks to these three guys. They have been very, very helpful, and they have been wonderful to work with in getting ready for this forum. And all I can say is that if one of you is not around next year, not selected this year, there's next year. So don't give up. I'd also like to thank the audience for your questions. Thought that there might be more of them, but I think we had enough to go ahead with that had been submitted in advance. I also invite you now to have some cookies and some candy and some fruit in the back of the room and take time to talk individually with these guys. There are several board members, current board members who are here, and they might take the opportunity to talk with you as well about your issues or questions that they can have to help you with. And for the rest of you, bon appetit. Please, before you go, take your chair back. You don't get a cookie unless you return the chair.
I saw.